Oh, would you let go of my wheel? Hey, come on! Hey, watch it, watch
it! Hey guys, guess who's back? Anyways, if you didn't already know, I'm a pretty huge rail fan. I'll take any opportunity to see trains in action on movies or TV, especially when they're in the lead role. So when I heard about Horror Express back in 2024, I knew I had to clear up my schedule for the day. Don't worry, I called off in advance. Not only that, but this movie being more obscure and, well, a horror film, meant that I had a more interesting topic for my next video. So, with that said, let's begin! Did you know Horror Express has the exact same inspiration as John Carpenter's The Thing? That being the 1938 novella, Who Goes There? Written by John Campbell Jr. That aside, the idea to center the movie around a train was actually the result of a previous film that director, Eugenio Martin, and producer Bernard Gordon had worked on together, that being Pancho Villa, as the two were enamored with the model train that they had used for filming that movie, and wanted to use it again. And so, after throwing a few ideas around, they eventually landed on Horror Express. And so, from 1971 to 1972, on a budget of $300,000, filming began, coincidentally using the same sets as Pancho Villa for the interiors of the train. Funnily enough, Phillips and Martin weren't the only ones who were fond of the model, as the cast and crew liked playing with the train on their downtime between filming. But that's enough about the movie's production. Let's take a look at how the actual film itself holds up. Alrighty, let's take a look at the story for Horror Express. As always, spoilers for the movie, though given how old it is at this point, you've either seen it or you just don't care. So, let's begin. In Horror Express, an anthropologist known as Professor Saxton discovers a mysterious creature frozen over in a cave in Manchuria, which he plans to bring home with him to research further via a train known as the Trans-Siberian Express. However, while in transit, the creature begins to thaw out, and thanks to an attempted sabotage by a rival scientist, the creature escapes and starts killing off various passengers across the train. Though initially annoyed at the revelation, Saxton understands the severity of the situation, and so with the help of the rival scientist and his assistant, he sets out to stop the creature before it kills everyone on the train and potentially beyond. In terms of horror movies, I'd say that Horror Express can definitely be a bit cheesy, with things like the monster design, the sound that plays whenever the monster kills someone, along with some of the acting and reactions to the monster. No, it doesn't get annoying. What made you think that? But those aside, I don't think those are indicative of the movie's quality at all, as I think Horror Express is pretty creative in terms of its atmosphere and setting. Trains are just as much social locations as they are very isolated, as while you can generally get a good view of everything, it's only within a certain range, in a specific section of the train. So the idea that something or someone could be able to slip on and move around unnoticed really isn't that outlandish. Never mind the fact that it's 1906 and the train is on a cross-country trek through what seems to be a pretty barren landscape with next to no stops along the way. So it's not like there's high hopes of anyone coming to save you. But focusing back on the movie, something I really appreciate is how they set themselves apart with the setting. In most movies like this, you'd usually go for something way more industrial, like an Alien or The Thing. But Horror Express sets itself on a brightly lit, luxurious passenger train, which of course is full of people. So as a result, the monster escaping feels like a ticking clock, which makes you more anxious for everyone on board, because nobody even knows what the thing is. And by the time they all figure out that it's active, it's already too late, as the monster has already started killing people on board. Hell, the monster was killing people even before it got loaded onto the train, but nobody was able to trace it back to it. And as I mentioned earlier, it's not like they're in a position where a third party can just come in to save them. The characters are on their own till well after the halfway mark, and even then it's not a sure bet, since they don't know what the monster's gonna do next. So by the time the plot gets going, the characters are already at a disadvantage, and in turn have to play catch up with it, which I would say is as good a segue as any to talk about the characters. So let's do that, starting with the main man himself, Alexander Saxton. Now, it's not unreasonable for certain characters to be more level-headed in a horror movie, but I find it very impressive that Professor Saxton is the calmest person in the room, despite all the madness unfolding in front of him. Especially since one could argue that he caused the whole situation in the first place, considering that he brought the creature onto the train. But at the same time, Saxton didn't know that the thing was still alive. I mean, seriously, look at it. Not only that, but he wasn't the one who pulled it loose. In fact, Saxton kept the monster under multiple locks and keys that people constantly tried to pry at. At the same time though, Saxton definitely could have handled the situation better, as he was pretty dismissive of all the red flags that were shown to him leading up to the monster's escape. And when the authorities asked to look through his crate, he was very uncooperative, which led to him being arrested. But Saxton does get to make up for it, as he helps to study the monster after it's been captured, and later saves everyone else from it. And like I said earlier, it really is debatable as to whether or not he actually caused the whole problem. The same cannot be said for Dr. Wells though. Wrong guy. There he is. But first, his personality. Where Saxton is presented as being very calm and collected and always being able to approach everything with a level head, Wells is kind of the opposite. Not in the sense that he's unintelligent or handles things poorly, but more that he reacts how you'd expect someone to react to these situations. As a result, like Saxton, it's a lot of fun to see Wells play off the other supporting characters, though there's definitely one big elephant in the room regarding his character. I already mentioned it in the story section, but remember how I said it was debatable as to whether or not Saxton was responsible for the monster escaping, and how Wells didn't get that luxury? That's because Wells had actively asked a baggage man to look through the crate, and in doing so gave the monster an opportunity to kill the baggage man and get out. He even admits this to Saxton later on. Though, like Saxton, Wells does get to help out with the monster. In fact, I actually say he does more, as Wells is the one who performs autopsies on all of the monster's victims, which allows them to deduce his capabilities, and they even manage to kill the monster just as it's trying to kill Wells. And had the monster killed him, it would have been pretty catastrophic, which I think serves as good enough segue to talk about the big guy itself. I really appreciate how the characters don't look stupid trying to combat it, and the monster itself feels fully realized. So when the characters manage to defeat it, it feels satisfying. But in order for you guys to really understand what I mean, I need to explain some aspects about the monster that I've kind of been hinting at throughout the video. See, remember how I said it would be catastrophic if the monster had killed Dr. Wells? Well, remember, in a lot of the scenes I showed of the monster killing people, they were always left in the same condition as everyone who watched Eternals. And when Dr. Wells performs autopsies on all of the monster's victims, he finds that they were also left in the same condition as people who thought Eternals would be good. Well, that's because the monster drains the intelligence of any of its victims, specifically those who look it in the eye, hence the bleeding. As a result, the monster picking off the passengers feels a lot more tense, not just because the group that can fight it is getting smaller, but because it's getting smarter with each kill. It's like an inverse of alien isolation. For example, remember how I said the monster killed a baggage man as part of its initial escape? Well, part of the reason for that was because it had managed to pick the locks on its own crate. And the reason it was able to do that is because the person it had killed before getting loaded onto the train was a locksmith. And as a hint that the monster can absorb people's intelligence, they show it testing various objects to see which one is able to pick the lock. After it kills the baggage man, it not only mimics the whistle that he was doing while he was working, but it proceeds to move around the train completely undetected, because the baggage man would have had knowledge of all the nooks and crannies, and thus he would know which paths were least traveled and any secret passageways that you could move around through. What I think makes these kills even better is that the monster isn't just a mindless killing machine. Everyone it kills has something that they need in some form, or actively serves as an obstacle in its way. Not only that, but whenever people do find one of the monster's victims, it's already back to skulking around. In fact, the only reason Dr. Wells was able to spot it was by pure accident. Honestly, as bad as it was that Dr. Wells' carelessness led to the monster escaping, this is probably the best case scenario for everyone involved. Think about it. If Saxton had managed to get it back to his lab in England, it would have definitely escaped afterwards, as it had already thawed out. Not only that, but almost every victim it had would have been someone incredibly intelligent. And that's not even mentioning that the monster itself isn't actually a physical entity, rather a form of energy that's able to jump between various hosts, like the creature that Dr. Saxton found in the cave, or the man who seemingly killed the monster when it tried to attack Dr. Wells. And so, the monster would have been nigh unstoppable. In fact, the only reason that the monster was able to lose in the end was due to its desperation operation, as it commandeers the train right before it's about to crash, with Saxton and all the other passengers managing to escape in the nick of time. Though all is revealed right before that, as Saxton not only accurately deduced it was an alien, but was proven correct, as the monster had accidentally been left behind on Earth millions of years ago, before getting frozen over in the cave where Saxton eventually found it. And once it escaped onto the train, it started looking for a way home, which it eventually found as it learned not only of humanity's plans for space travel, but the potential to build a ship out of steel, which was a relatively new element at the time. However, as understandable as the motives are, the monster's path of destruction is simply too much to ignore, and so Saxton chooses to confront it anyways. He even taunts him with the idea that it knows the cures to several diseases as a result of all the knowledge it's compiled over the years. But Saxton holds firm, and so in response, it reanimates the corpses of all the passengers it's killed, which leads to it commandeering the train just before it crashes, like I mentioned earlier, and in turn brings me to my final verdict. A horror movie is only as good as its monster, and I really like the monster in Horror Express. The narrative does a good job of assigning the monster very recognizably human traits without taking away from the overall concept that they're going for. And like I said earlier, the movie in general does a really good job of utilizing the monster as a concept, with these traits and more being the reason why I think Horror Express is a pretty decent watch. But with that said, I think I've said everything I need to. So, let's wrap up the video. It really feels good to be posting again, but that aside, if you couldn't already tell, this was originally meant to be the Halloween special, but the time kinda got away from me. Don't worry, I've been spending that time working on multiple other videos that I plan to get out before the end of the year. But with that said, be sure to tell me down in the comments section, did you like Horror Express if you've watched it? And if you haven't, has my video convinced you to do so? Anyways, be sure to like, share, and subscribe today to join the A-list. And have a great day. Bye!